Time having arrived and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022 to order. The first order of business on our agenda is the minutes of our last meeting from 8/10 of 22, copies of which are in the packets. Did anyone note any revisions or corrections necessary? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Motion by Martins. Is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding ARPA funding requests and related budget modification. You received in your email the results of our ranking from our last meeting on the lead pipe project that we were ranking and scoring. Clearly, that project scored really high, higher than most of what we've seen so far. And knowing the discussion that we had with the Public Works Director, their intention also is to seek additional DNR funding, but obviously there was a timing issue. The Finance Director and I were just talking about the fact that rather than access ARPA funding immediately, approve ARPA funding immediately, we would have the option as a committee to authorize them to proceed with access to ARPA funding, assuming the other money isn't received or isn't available. So rather than use the ARPA funding and then go to pay it back retroactively, you certainly could approve that project to move forward. And then once we have clarity on what's happening with DNR funds, rather than pay ourselves back, we could perhaps access those ARPA funds if the DNR monies are either not available or certainly not fast enough. What are your thoughts on that? Go ahead.
I guess just to, my concerns really are the fact that, many grants generally do not allow you to supplant other money with grant money. And so this would be basically supplanting money that we've already expended with that grant money. And so that's, I guess, the biggest area of concern I have. And, when I'm doing these quarterly reports to the federal government, I'm detailing how we spend the money. And so I think it's just kind of invites questions and red flags. If one month I report, oh, we spent this much money on something, and then the next month I'm saying, wait, no, we didn't spend this much money on that something. I would prefer that you authorize going ahead with the program, and then if the DNR money does not come through, that we find other funding sources, which could be the ARPA money, or it could be, even city money, and then use ARPA for a project that we would typically have used city money for. So, like if, we find out in early 2023 that the DNR money is not available, a road project could be used for ARPA money, and then, the money that we would typically have allocated out of CIP, you just do a budget mod for that. Again, only because I'm just concerned about using ARPA money and then supplanting it with a different grant source.
I guess, do we have the option, rather than to even do a payback and a firm number of them, the other option we would have is to not pay ourselves back, and if the DNR comes through with additional funding, just do more work. So you would just replace even more lead service lines, rather than limit yourself to a certain number and then look to pay yourself back. I mean, you
could do that too.
Much like, when you come in under on CIP and you go back to the work list and see what else you can achieve. I think if we were to approve the request and expend the dollars, then if additional funding comes forward for the same purpose, you then would just do more of those. I think that's probably an option as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts, committee? Okay, Michael, go ahead.
I guess my only if we decide to go ahead and use city money for the lead line replacements, and then if the state funding comes through, we can do even more. I guess the question is where the city, where the city money is going to come from. Would we expect towards the end of the year, a budgetary surplus that we could draw off of that, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the surplus for this year yet. It's too early to really tell. We've had,
Well, we're already getting requests for fuel and
Right.
legal, so
Yeah.
we don't know what we're going to finish with.
I do think too, the other thing in the application, it was really identified as a water project. And I think, there would be more flexibility if we classified it as revenue loss, within our 10 million revenue loss category, because the reporting requirements are significantly less. The federal government just came out with a new Q&A on July 27th. And, procurement has been a big stumbling block with the ARPA dollars for us, and I think probably for other government entities, because the federal government's procurement requirements are pretty significant. I know if you would speak with Greg Soibert in transit, he would explain to you how difficult it is to purchase buses and why we often piggyback on with big communities who purchase buses, because they have expertise in federal purchases, because you have, America Buys, where you're, having to purchase things constructed in America. There's minority and women disadvantaged business regulations. I mean, there's the procurement rules on the federal level are, like
Complicated.
this thick. So the federal government on their July 27th regulations basically said, if we're spending money out of our revenue loss, that all of those procurement rules no longer apply to us. Before they did. And so they actually are allowing communities to go back, and if you had classified something within a category that is not your revenue loss, that you could go back and actually classify it as a revenue loss because of the
Difficulty.
change and the less restrictive nature of the procurement. The other benefit they just recently announced on July 27th is federal match. So, and this is another area, like when we're looking at the PFAS that I've been stressing about, is there are regulations that say if you get federal money, you cannot use ARPA dollars as the federal match if there is a local match requirement. But now the federal government has said, if you're using your revenue loss, that $10 million, then you can use it for federal match. But this has just been released, and, I have gone through those regulations, but, there's a lot of words in them. And so I've scanned it. I need to really
Focus
thoroughly
it, yeah.
understand all of the nuances to it. So I think I do plan on actually going through all of our categories of spending to see if maybe we should be looking for some additional flexibility due to the changes in procurement. So I plan on bringing that to the next Finance Committee meeting. And they saying, before, if you reported it one way, you couldn't reallocate it in the next quarter's reporting, but now you can. I think just one other nuance on the ARPA on this July 27th is, when we give money to someone else, we have to classify whether they're a subrecipient, contractor, or a beneficiary. They're now saying if it's a revenue loss, they won't classify any of them as subrecipient. That's important in that subrecipients have compliance requirements that they have to meet now. So that's another, I guess,
Another layer of
reason why
reporting,
I would
yeah.
want to go through and evaluate all of our our allocations to
to
date.
see if we have to do any shifting. Okay, that would be good future discussion. So, I think, and maybe the question we need to ask is of the Public Works Director, if we could maybe have Eric come up, because he had proposed this lead pipe project to start with. Assuming that DNR funding would become available later, and assuming we would authorize access to these particular dollars, where's your preference? Would it be to just do more work and get more of them done? Or would you want to hold these funds kind of aside in case the grant opportunity doesn't plan out in time?
Yeah, I guess I'd rather just hold them aside.
Okay.
With the idea that we're also going to be applying for the 23 funds coming here soon, so, and I don't know what those are going to look like either.
Okay.
And so I just want to make sure that what we apply for, what we get, that we can spend. I don't want to try to,
Right.
with
Well, and you
the
said you've
program
had
that
some
we have.
difficulty getting enough people
Yeah.
to do them.
Right.
Both contractors and citizens.
Right.
To meet the requirements. So there's
Yeah.
not enough of a wait list to maybe just do more. All right. So what do you think, committee? Would someone want to make a motion on this one then to authorize access to the funds in the event that the alternative fund source from the DNR does not make itself available in time?
I need a clarification there. Are you asking
Okay.
authorizing ARPA funds in?
Well, that's
as a
what they applied
contingency?
for.
Got it.
So
Got it.
yes, so they applied for 200,000 in ARPA to finish
Yeah.
some more of these. And so that's what he would be holding aside. So you would authorize them to access 200,000 of ARPA funding if it's necessary. If it's not, they just don't. And then we reallocate it to something else. I think that's kind of how I understood Mary Ann's commentary. So, and that request and that authorization from us would kind of sit aside until we know a little more.
Can we let it sit aside until we know a little more?
I think we could. I mean, if we adopted a resolution authorizing spending in this area, recognizing that ARPA is available in the future, and not really commit it.
Sure.
I mean, I think, isn't this like any of the other projects we don't automatically approve? We just put it on the back burner, right?
Right, sort of like the fire.
Well, and so that's what we
station.
started to do with the firefighters, the hiring. We put that on the pile, and then at the next meeting, we ended up having to approve them and push them forward. So, I don't want to get in the same situation with this where, we have a timing problem where, if we were going to approve something and set it aside, basically approve it contingent upon failure to receive alternative funds. And so.
When will we know if we get the funds? Do you know?
I think November, December, we should have a pretty good idea from the DNR what will be available.
So, I mean, if we just put it on the back burner, we can revisit it in December or whenever.
Right, and these projects would be completed in the spring anyway, right? So, or
The-
did you want to complete these before the end of this year?
Yes, so there's a few that are on hold right now for just before we went ahead with expenditures, just need the authorization to do that. So if you're comfortable providing us the authority to move ahead, we'll carry those costs until the DNR funds come out or we need another funding source.
Right, and then if that occurs, then we'd come back and pull it off this
Yep.
hold pile, and we'd quick fund it, if that's
Yep.
what Sarah's describing. Okay. So then the motion that we would need then is to authorize the Public Works Director and the Water Department to go forward and continue to provide for lead service line replacements on the residential side, and with the understanding that if access to ARPA funding per this request is necessary, that they'll come back for approval. Okay.
I
We
would,
have a-
I would second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion from Watson and a second from Dinny. Further discussion or questions? Go ahead, Michael.
So just to clarify then, at this point, we're using city funds for the lead line replacements.
The utility would carry the cost
The
until they
utility
know
would-
one way or the other, yes.
Yeah, actually, we're taking it out of, it's like a housing stock improvement fund. That's where it's been funded because the PSC doesn't allow us to fund our share, or a share with rate.
With
ratepayer
ratepayer
money.
funding?
Ratepayers,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll know a little more in the next month or two here, so,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So if we're all clear on the motion, with no further comment, then members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That
Thank
motion
you.
carries. Thank you. Also, under our ARPA category, we have a new request today that we'll rank and score for next time. This one comes to us from the police department, and we've had some discussion, at least I've been privy to some discussion within the homelessness task force that I'm still serving on, as well as the mayor, that there is certainly demand and interest in the community for a year-round nighttime shelter option that is not winter only. And so I believe that the mayor and the police chief have been in touch with our partners at Catholic Charities who run our winter program to see what the option is for a 12-month center. And so we've been provided some numbers on that. The request would be that we would seed this with ARPA funding to get this stood up and running for 2 years, 23 and 24. And then, obviously, alternative fund sources will certainly come into play. The homelessness task force has had discussions with United Way, and I believe the mayor has also made some early contacts with the county where these services are being provided in Eau Claire County and La Crosse County. Their counties are also partnering at some level of participation. So, that all is in its infancy right now, but, that's kind of where we would be at with shelter for unhoused individuals year-round versus only when it's cold out. And that may alleviate some of the pressure that we've seen in those warmer months in other public areas where we've had some substantial issues. So we do have the police chief with us this evening. Ben, did you want to comment on your request at all? Oh, and yes, and the mayor as well. So, and Roberto. So come on up and talk to us about this.
Sure. I don't have a whole lot to add other than what you said. This would be dollars that would allow Catholic Charities to expand their operations to 365 days a year. So right now they operate from November 1st through April 30th during the colder weather months. And this would allow them to operate in the summer months, from May 1st through October 31st. And so I think there isn't any disagreement that this is a need in our community. I think any organization or person working with homeless individuals in our community would agree that this is a need. And so the question before you today is, is the council interested in prioritizing the ARPA dollars for this expenditure, for this need in our community? And then Roberto's here from Catholic Charities. We had a conversation with him today. He has some more detailed information in regards to budget, if that's of interest to the committee, and of course the mayor too.
Okay, well, so questions for either, do you want Roberto to present first? Because you've got some numbers in your packets, but he can validate some of that. So welcome, Roberto. Thank you for making the trip today. If you could just walk us through a little bit of the number part of your proposal.
Right. I don't know if you have the budget that I sent, but.
We do.
Okay. Basically, the first column that you can see is what it cost us, and these are real numbers, that the operating numbers that cost us in the year 21-22 from November 1st through April 30th of 21-22. So the total expenses or the total revenue was 257. We got that revenue from government grants, and we have to remember we got some COVID funding because of COVID.
Sure.
And gifts and donations was 164,000, and foundations revenue was 12,000. So our total revenue was $257,000 to operate that facility. Now, that it's a different facility. We had to operate at the Presbyterian Church because we didn't have a location. Our building was too small for the number of people we were serving. Mm-hmm. So we had to move to the basement of the Presbyterian facility. Now that the CPC is going to be operating, we're going to have enough space. And thank God for CPC. It's
Absolutely.
A wonderful initiative. So, and it will allow us to also provide services from all different sources, or our partners are going to be there, so we can provide full services to the unsheltered. The second column is our revenue. Again, is 237,000, considering this a similar situation as this year with the loss of the COVID funding. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's a little less. And our total expenses will be $379,000, and primarily those expenses, the reason is salaries. I mean, it's personnel. It is manpower. To operate a warming center, you need For 6 months, we need a minimum of 4 people. For the year-round, we need nine people. Because we were operating weekends, we were operating nights, so we need 9 people. And we used to operate it with a lot of volunteers, but unfortunately with COVID, our volunteer we have some, but they have dried up. I mean, it is very difficult. So the total funding required, or the total expenses for operating a year-round shelter is $505,000, which provides us with a deficit of $255,000. Now, I put a third alternative because this is something that we're considering as well in La Crosse and in Eau Claire, in our communities, to operate a day shelter as well. And so that we can house the people day and night. And during the day shelter, again, it's the same revenue, but the total cost will be $638,000 or a deficit of $388,000. So I don't know if you have any questions. And
Committee members, any questions for Roberto about the report or about the projections? You know, we're not sure yet, once CPC gets operating with all agencies under one roof, there may be some economies of scale that they can all share and enjoy from an overhead standpoint, I think, but this must be representative of your current actual overhead multiplied out for an entire year, I would assume. Okay. Mayor?
Yes, I just want to share a little bit of what I've preliminarily discussed. Obviously, I didn't want to get out too far ahead of this discussion here, but I did stop over and talk to the deputy administrator today, and I said, hey, this is what we're considering. Here's what other counties are doing. We'd love it if you want to participate. Also, I want to give a shout out to Catholic Charities. We had a really great discussion, and there are 168 separate Catholic Charities organizations, and they're all responsive to their communities. So this is the kind of stuff that they do for other communities, but they listened to us and said, okay, we'll put something together for you, Wausau. We know what you need. So I just want to thank you for the work you've done. It's really important that you're responsive to us, and it's not just some kind of national organization coming and shoving it in where it doesn't work. So really helpful. And then I have a couple of other conversations lined up to talk to United Way, because I know that there's probably a little bit of opportunity there. And we probably have some other municipalities, maybe, ? But especially the county. I'll want to talk to the administrator. And if you're paying attention to their ARPA funding, they have $15 million on the docket tonight. So we'll see how that goes for them. But yeah, I would be willing to answer any questions you have directed at me to.
Okay. Does anyone have questions at all for the mayor on this? She and I have been serving on the homelessness task force since her arrival. And it continues to meet. It actually started out, the nucleus of it started out within the Wausau PD after the parking ramp ordinance. And later on, once we got our feet under us a little bit, that operation was turned over to United Way, and they're managing it now. So at our last meeting, we did have some discussion with Ben Lee. Obviously, United Way campaigns for next year are kicking off now. And he indicated that, it's clearly been identified as a need in the community, and that his supposition would be that there would likely be, something for us, assuming the agencies would apply. Sarah?
So bottom line, what is the total cost if we did column 3? Because I really like the idea of a day and night shelter, or, having it open. And then if we could partner with the county, because I think it would serve, county and city residents.
Problem, I'm hopeful that works out. I really am. My concern, I
But
think.
what would be the bottom line? I guess
bottom
that's my
line is
question.
the total cost is $638,000.
Okay.
And the deficit that we're running is $388,000
Okay, so that would be annually if it would be.
annually. Correct.
Daily, okay.
So tentatively
about
barring
400,000.
alternative fund sources, that would be the ask for column 3 then.
Yep, for 400,000, right?
So,
And I don't want to get too far ahead, but, Liz and I have been talking about some of the other grants that are available for continuum of care, things like that. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to apply for that too. Again, we'll apply and we'll hope and, move forward with what you guys decide.
well, and I guess what I'd like to maybe see us do is maybe if we have the option to rank both proposals, night only for year-round and and the other one, and with the two separate amounts, with the 250 and the 400. So partially because we know that in our community, we have a need for all of it. And, I think this may be something that, we recognize, and I think the council recognized in its retreat, it's a serious need for us, and it's a problem that's getting bigger, not smaller. And so I think with us bringing on the outreach coordinator and that work starting up again, and this, I think we have the ability to create some transformational power in some of the things that we see happening in our community that have gotten very negative since Officer Lemarant stopped the outreach work just because he had to. So, I would love to see us partner with the county at some percentage level, and I hope that they will partner with us. I do have some concerns, though, that there seems to be a misunderstanding with their board that homelessness is only an urban problem and that it's only a city of Wausau problem. And I think that there's going to have to be some messaging provided to that board that helps them understand that it's not, and that this is not just the city of Wausau's problem. And so, obviously, if that message is accurately communicated and they opt to partner with us, it would be huge. But I think we have to be prepared to move with or without them. Because in our case, our situation won't get any better if we do nothing. Sarah?
Well, and I guess is there an option, because obviously this is going to be a $400,000 issue every year. So, I mean, we can maybe do what we've done to some of the other things and work it into the levy, like a certain percentage over 2 to 3 years.
My vision was that we would work it into things like we do with community development block grants. So we would seed it, start it up, stand it up, get it going, give it 2 years. That gives it some stability until it gets well established. And during that time, all involved would be working on alternative fund sources and fundraising. And so if there's grants available, if there's community support funding, like from United Way and things, hopefully then the funding that we have seeded this with would at least in large part be replaced by alternative funds. And, because we obviously need to get it to launch, but, I think the continued maintenance is a shared effort. So, we may always have some role to play, but we should certainly never have a perpetual 100% role to play. So,
I
go ahead,
guess
Mayor.
my desire too is to collect data as we're doing this, right? So we understand who we're helping. Roberto, when we were talking earlier, had a really interesting statistic that unhoused individuals cost the system, city county system, between $70,000 and $200,000 a year. So that is something to consider as well. The costs of the services when we could be upfront about it and help a lot of people.
Sure. Carol?
That's exactly what I was thinking. The 2 years, I like this idea. I'm very much in favor of it. But as I read through it before the meeting, my question was, what about after the 2 years? So, but definitely the data. That's what I was thinking too. Then there would be 2 years of data, and that would be really good to have.
True. And then if that then requires a supplemental budget ask in year 3, we would be well informed as to how much is actually necessary and, what we're able to source from other sources. And it does give some time for things like grant writing and, capital campaigning and things like that. So, Sarah?
I guess could I just ask for like a complete application, that shows, what the ask is and then what the time frame is for the spend down, sort of like the other ARPA. Because, this one just has that cover page and then their ask. It doesn't really specify it as well.
I think probably the chief and I can work on that, maybe with Mary Ann's help.
To fill out the rest of the form
yeah.
and get it, yes. So, and then if we can put numbers to it, including the spreadsheet that we have here, I think that's super helpful. So then if that could be emailed to us with the ranking sheet, then we can move it along in parallel. So we'll get the additional information, use that to rank both proposals, I think, see how they score. And it may be a matter of, we'll just have to see on the day programming situation. We know we want it. What can we afford? And so, no question on the need. Any other comments, Doug?
Yeah, just a logistics question. So the current location on 3rd Avenue would close and you would move?
They're already
Entirely?
over here.
Yes.
Oh, you
Yes,
are?
it will
Okay.
close. We are actually, CPC is planned to be open on October 17th. They tell us that on October 1st, it's probably Catholic Charity site will be ready, so we plan to move everything and we will shut down 3rd Street.
Okay. All right, Sarah.
I guess a stupid question. Is it possible to get like another column that says we keep the one open on the west side and also on the east side, so there's multiple warming shelters? I don't know.
It's a matter of, that is a cost again.
Of course.
Sure, I could plan and present that, but
I know it's an expense, but it's nice to have that offer available on both sides of the river.
Yeah, it does present a logistical challenge for them, though, because they then get 2 sets of overhead, 2 sets of rent, 2 sets of utilities, and a need to split staff between 2 remote sites. So, I think the whole point of CPC was to get everybody together under the one roof and have that whole thing be one-stop shop for all of the services that the affected individuals would need, and then they can, not spend their whole day traversing the city trying to get the help that is necessary from a number of agencies. So, we certainly could take a snapshot look at what that would cost, but, I think when we rank and score, we should be ranking and scoring it, assuming that at the minimum, it's operating at one location, and use those numbers. I think speculatively, 2 locations is, it would be a nice to have, but I think it really puts a large burden on Catholic Charities, I feel like, to run 2 of them. So.
you have Salvation Army as well that operates.
Yeah, yes, and we have the Bridge Street Mission as well. So there's some others too that are doing intake work, so. Carol?
This isn't about this particular project, but has CPC presented to the council?
Yes, when they first began. Not since the building has been nearly completed, but when the concept was unveiled, they did. And then I believe they've also presented to the citizen panel for block grant because they received some funding from them.
Okay. So was that before or after the new council?
Well before, I want to say it was probably 2020.
Yes.
It was right before the mayor was elected, I think.
So
right before.
I do have a discussion with them, and I might be getting a sneak peek. So I'll let them know that if there's interest from the council.
Well,
to
even if
maybe-
we would invite them just to give us a quick,
Yep.
a presentation to refresh everyone's memory about what they plan to do and
I think they would love that.
sneak peek if they have some
I'm
photos
speaking
for
on their
us.
behalf. Sorry if
I-
you're watching.
Well, and so the principals of that project are part of the homelessness task force, and so I've worked with them even in a subgroup intensely, and they are very proud of the project, and they will love to talk about it with anybody who wants to talk about it, so.
We
I think-
just had a presentation at our neighborhood group meeting,
Yes.
and I found it it was great.
It's amazing.
I was really excited about it. So it's just that if not everyone has, I didn't understand the totality of it before that, so I think that would be helpful.
One of the number one problems that we identified in the very first incantation of the task force was that part of the deficit we have in our area was connecting people who need service to the actual service that's there. So sometimes, just logistically, they're difficult to get to, and in other cases, some people and some agencies didn't know that one another existed, and people who needed help didn't know what help was out there or where to get it or how to apply for it. And that was the nexus of the formation of this under one roof idea, that people can help each other, agencies can help each other, get people to a better place. So that's huge for Wausau. So, okay, so then why don't we request, because we don't have to act on this tonight, let's request that we get that additional information, fill out the rest of the ARPA request form, and send that to us with the rating spreadsheet.
Yep.
So we can
And then
rate.
you want to be able to rate it 2 different ways, right?
Well, we want to be able to rank the night only and the day and night.
Correct.
So, yes,
Okay.
so the 200 and the 400.
Okay.
Okay, is that good with the committee? And then we'll have that for next time? Okay, good. Seeing nods, I think we're good on that. So, thank you, everyone. It was quite a body of work, so I appreciate that. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action approving a recruitment plan for a transit director. I think we're all aware that Greg Soibert is retiring soon, and so we'll need to go through a recruitment to replace him. And you've got a memo from HR talking about perhaps using an outside source or a recruitment source to locate someone to fill that position. Clearly, he's held that job for 40 years. And so, our need to recruit someone to fill, there's an awful lot of institutional knowledge within him. And so, we're going to need someone that is not only a visionary, but, highly knowledgeable and experienced in, running a system like that, and maybe even have some creative and fresh ideas as well. So, sure. So if you want to come up, we'll bring up citizen Kathy Zorn, who's been on the Transit Commission. Welcome, Kathy.
I just want to make a comment. I'm speaking on behalf of myself as a bus rider. I think this is critical to advertise nationally for his position, and it shouldn't wait until we hire a HR director. It needs to be done now. And hopefully we can hire someone before he leaves to get some of his expertise. He's been with the system for many, many years. He has a lot of knowledge, and I want the system to grow. I do not want it to fall apart. I depend on it, and many other people in this community depend on it, and it's very important we get the right person in here to expand the service. And I appreciate everything that Metro Ride staff and bus drivers and Greg has done over the years. It's critical to people getting services like the CPC, which is on a bus route. And that's all I need to say. Now I can walk home.
Oh, Jesus.
The bus quit running. But it's important that you know that this needs to be looked at as soon as possible.
Well said. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, so that's what they would do, I believe, is use a recruitment service, cast a wide net, look for the best applicants they can find, and it's always an advantage when someone who's new can work with the person that's leaving to extract some of that knowledge before it's gone for good. So, Sarah, did you have a comment?
Yeah, first, I guess, the budget modification, where would that come from?
So I guess I expected that it would come out of the transit budget itself.
From the vacancy, no doubt, right?
Right.
And I think it's a great idea to do national, just because, getting some new, fresh ideas, I think that's a really good idea. So I'm very excited that it's going to be put out on a nationwide service, so.
Okay. Anyone else? Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to agree, what Elder Watson said, and also, the others here, that, we're at a critical juncture, and I think we need to use an outside recruiting service to find the ideal candidate for our new transit director.
Yep, I agree. Is there a motion to approve the
Okay.
expense and the
Question.
recruitment? Oh, go ahead, Doug,
I have
sorry.
another question. Do we have a timeline that we would expect this 22.5 to generate a candidate, or is it a typical?
Do we know, Ann, how long you would run the recruitment?
We have not signed a contract yet, we just got the numbers, they'll probably be similar to the HR director.
Okay, so they don't know yet, they haven't signed a contract yet with a firm, but it would run a similar cycle to what they're seeking for the HR director fulfillment, so.
And that would be before year end, I'm guessing. How long is that? All right.
Yep. So there's lots of work to be done, so the sooner we can get someone, the better. So, okay, so is there a motion then to approve the expense and the recruitment? Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Let's see here. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action granting a $1,000 one-time non-base building market adjustment for designated employees. And so you'll see that what you've got in the packets is actually a PowerPoint, I believe, that was presented to HR. This item was actually in this committee last year and was referred back to HR to be reworked a little bit. And so somewhere along the line, there was a misunderstanding about this market rate adjustment, and there was all kinds of talk about hazard pay and bonuses and whatnot, and then there was some kind of scrap between, unions and non-reps and, those who can bargain and those who can't. And so based on that, we referred it back to be reworked because we thought it needed a little more. So the HR committee's done the rework, and so the PowerPoint presentation that you have in the packets is it. I guess, does anyone have questions for Ann Keenan on what she's got here as far as to explain the market rate adjustment? She does in her narrative chart the number of years it takes for the non-reps to get to pay maximum versus the groups who are negotiating, and it is an awful lot longer. on the non-rep side. So, they obviously, they don't get the luxury of a contract that comes up anymore every couple years where they can negotiate everything from the work rules and the benefits to the pay. So they really are at the mercy of, us and the Common Council and the HR committee to figure out what the market trends are and then, I guess, choose to compensate them accurately. So what are your thoughts on this? Does anyone have questions for Ann? Go ahead, Carol.
So who exactly are the non-represented? Everyone except the police officers, firefighters, bus operators, is that correct?
Correct, and it would affect everyone who's above midpoint. Back in last year, this was presented along with a proposal for anyone below midpoint where that was approved. So if you were below midpoint, every 6 months you got a 3% increase. Anyone above midpoint, the $1,000 was suggested, and because it was shot back to HR, anyone above midpoint did not receive any adjustments. So again, it's harder to keep dedicated employees who have been here longer because we're trying to catch up with the market. We're doing a market study and everything else. So that was kind of a way after COVID where the market just went crazy for employment. So it's to help us keep our dedicated employees who are above midpoint until we can do another market study on our pay scale and see where we need to make adjustments.
Okay. Part of the
Thank you.
struggle I saw too, I guess, when we're now more than 6 months down the road since no one got anything. And that puts us really further behind market because the economy continues to have the trend spiral that it's having, is that I think there was a lot of confusion that was surrounding the issue during the discussion, because even in the meeting that took place in here, somehow that became a discussion about represented and unrepresented, and that was never what it was intended to be about. And so I think that confusion and the perception that union was being pitted against non-union people, which was never the intent, that carried the day. And, I think then that confusion caused us to decide that it really needed some clarity. And so, in the meantime, that did kind of ruin it for everybody and nobody got anything. So here we are again. So Sarah, did you have a comment?
Well, I guess I had a question. So you said the people above midpoint have not had any adjustment. People below have had?
Correct.
And represented members have had?
Represented members in their contracts, they get a bump. I want to say they've done a 2-1 bump, so representatives obviously keep up with the market. So when we negotiate, we look at the comparables with the market for them. So for this year, I can say that fire and police got, I believe, a 2% come January 1st, and they've gotten another 1% mid-year. Whereas, so they get the bumps. Their scale is a lot shorter than our scale. So for our scale, a regular person above midpoint is going to see a 1.5% increase for the whole year. So they're not seeing the bumps like the police and the fire and Metro. Metro, we just negotiated their contract and they got a 2% bump mid-year, and then they're going to see their 1.5 and 1.5.
I mean, it's unfortunate that there has to be two standards for represented, and I know it's not anybody's fault directly, but I also think that, I mean, especially with CPI and inflation being so intense, I mean, we have to give some relief to these non-represented folks to keep them up to date with the represented folks. So, I mean, I want it to be equal across the board, and I know that's not something that's possible, sadly, with our current, laws and acts that are enabled, but, I mean, they need some relief. So I am definitely in favor of this.
I tend to agree. I think everyone's grocery cart and gas tank costs the same, whether you bargain or don't. So, they're all feeling the same pinch economically. And the slowness of that progression, I think, has been frustrating for a lot of our work groups. So, Mary Ann, did you have?
I was just going to say, so we've not identified a funding source for this when we proposed it back in December of 2021. ARPA was the recommended funding source. And there was also then discussion, I think at that point, one of the pieces of feedback we got was, oh, no one really liked the idea of ARPA. Could we take it out of the 2021 surplus? And so that was then the next, I guess, recommended funding source. So we have not identified any new funding sources, so it would be, an application was completed for this. It was not, I don't believe it was actually ranked or anything like that.
But I think the temperature of the committee at the time was that they kind of backed off on the ARPA, and they
Yes.
were interested in the surplus if those
Right.
funds are still available.
Right, so that would be the identified funding
And we still
source.
have it?
Yes.
Okay. So additional questions, or Doug, go ahead.
So we approved early, I guess, April, May, the salary study or the market study. How are we coming on that?
We just got the proposals, and I believe tomorrow night they're going to open them.
Tomorrow during the day, yeah.
During the day.
At Board of Public Works.
Okay. So this, and I support this. This is really going to be a Band-Aid if we look at what we really need to do once we see this
Agreed.
result. So we're going to have to fix this and address it at some point.
Agreed.
I think it's not enough, but it's going to have to.
It's a
get
little
them
stopgap
through.
for now,
Right.
is what it feels like. So, Carol?
I agree wholeheartedly with Alder Watson, Alder Denny. I think, looking at this, a 1.5% increase, considering, yes, the cost of living is, that's so far below. And even when I look at the others, I realize funds are limited, but I think and I too wish that it could just be equal. But I also think it's so important for, employees to feel valued, and that's one really important way. It's a living, to make a living wage is so important. And so I'm fully behind it. I would like, also, I'd rather use the surplus funds if those are available rather than ARPA.
Okay. Is that a motion then to approve the one-time adjustment with surplus funding?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion by Lukens, second by Watson. Further discussion or questions? Michael?
I just want to make a comment. I just want to reiterate, because we discussed this in HR also, but just remember previously that with new employees, we eliminated the first two steps to give new employees a higher starting wage, and also for those below midpoint, we escalated the amount of, or reduced the amount of time it took to traverse those steps until you get up to midpoint. So the employees on the below midpoint received a pretty good. I'm not going to say that it's not keeping pace with inflation, but they received a pretty good bump over the last 8-9 months. But
this group got zero.
But yeah, those above midpoint, this was supposed to be this was supposed to be the what we're going to give those above midpoint. So this is the second half of that
Right.
equation.
And I think our refer back last time did really create a ripple effect on morale within the work groups.
Oh, absolutely.
After the fact. So hopefully that we can proceed forward with this time and
Yep.
and see it across the finish line. So with a motion and a second on the floor, was there any further discussion?
I just
Mary Ann?
wanted to, typically, when we're looking at these, it's only if there's not another revenue source that it's coming from the general fund. So, for example, because Community Development Authority employees are city employees, if there would be any employees there that qualify for the $1,000, the CDA would pay for that. Or if it's a water or sewer employee, it would be paid for by the utility. So I kind of generalized it before, and I just want to, clarify that
So would you
one
want
item.
us to include in our motion that then we would fund it from surplus absent an alternative
Yes.
fund source within the departments?
Yes.
Okay, is that amenable to Carol, to the first and the second?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that understanding, then, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Okay, let's switch back to our agenda. There we go. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action approving a 2023 a cost of living adjustment for non-represented employees. You know that we are in the throes of contract negotiations with our represented groups right now, and this is a cost of living adjustment for those same non-reps that do not bargain. Anybody have questions for Ann on this one at all? And we've got the memo from HR as well. And that recommends a 3% bump. And absent any questions for staff, is there a motion to approve that adjustment? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion?
And just
Go ahead,
to,
Michael.
just to reiterate, this starts with the 2023 budget, not immediately.
Right, January.
Correct.
So anything else on that from anyone? If not, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action approving leasing 2 skid steers for winter operations. You have some information in the packets on those. And we have Dustin with us, so welcome. Talk to us about skid steers and winter.
In the last 3 years, we've rented skid steers, and unfortunately this year, the program that we used to do that kind of went away, where they would purchase some skid steers on government pricing, and then we'd get a reduced rate. And we didn't find this out till the summer, and so we ran into trouble with, now what do we do? Because now we have to go, technically we should go out to RFP, but we're in a crunch with units. I did reach out to 5 different vendors. Unfortunately, 2 of them flat out said, nope, we can't get you nothing. 2 of them said, maybe we can, we'll know more this fall, here's a quote. And only 1 could actually guarantee. And so that's kind of what I'm asking for is, can I rent these units so that we guaranteed to have these units for winter? They're the units that we use to clear our sidewalks. So it's crucial that we have them.
I feel like with the appropriate sole source documentation that under the circumstances, there isn't a whole lot of alternative. You've made a reasonable effort to secure alternative pricing. We have a sole source documentation standard, and so as long as they would complete that paperwork to document the situation they're in, is that amenable to the committee to authorize those rentals? I see nods. Go ahead, Carol.
I was just going to say, for me, it would be, and I think it's such an important service, use, whatever. So that's crucial. And I just think that, snow clearing, all of those services, and the people who provide them don't get enough appreciation, and it's safety, so.
Yep, and it's glaringly obvious when it's not done, right? So
Exactly. So thank you and your department. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, so with that then, go ahead, Sarah.
And I guess, is there a way to get maybe some projections on purchasing them? Would it be more?
That is something we're going to look at in the future. We started doing the rental years ago because we had some utility tractors that were broke down all the time, and it was extremely hard to get parts. And so the decision at the time was made to move away. They had this awesome leasing program where we could save the money and we didn't have to do maintenance, stuff like that.
Right.
But going forward, if this is going to be the price going forward, we are definitely looking at other options for the future.
So maybe a CIP or something about
Maybe if that's what it comes to. So, or if they find a really good deal on them in the meantime, that's something that we could have a discussion about. Sometimes stuff becomes available either at auction or through sale, municipal or government sales that.
Yeah, we did look at, there's a more local company that offers municipal tractors that did look like a viable option. The problem was they weren't going to be able to have them built in time. So for this year, we had to do something so that we do have machines. But going forward, we do want to look at what our options are down the road, and we might be looking to purchase, because if this rental, is going to be so expensive, it might not be the best option.
I think it'd be cool to see them alongside. This is if we rented continually, and then this is the purchasing and
Right.
just being able
Well,
to.
and if we, assuming we
compare.
would purchase new equipment with warranty, the nickel and dime type repairs that add up and then start to tax you and make you want to rent equipment, maybe are less prevalent, at least on the front end. So that's something that I think we'd be interested in seeing numbers on sometime between now and next winter when you need them again. But, yep, I think, is there a motion then to authorize DPW to move forth with the sole source rental with the contingency that they complete the sole source paperwork? Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Thanks, Dustin. Let's see. Item number 7 is discussion and possible action regarding budget modification related to the fuel budget and rolling stock replacement. And you've got some information in the packet that talks about the cost of fuel, which we all know too well. And we've got Solomon with us from Motor Pool to talk with us about the rest of it. So welcome.
Hi, good evening. I'm just mainly here in case any of you have any questions. There were some numbers supplied in your packet, and pretty much it's well known across the board for everybody that fuel is just massively out of control for a period of time. And normally when we budget, we always budget this fluff factor because it's so volatile. We know that it's going to do the wave, but we just couldn't do anything to overcome that this year. Some of our budget for gasoline is already overspent. Diesel's close to it. Motor oil and grease is near done, and DEF is overspent as well. So we have to have that money to continue operations for all the departments, including police, fire, sewer, water, airport, public works, parks department, all fuel up at DPW. So in order for all those departments to continue with their services, we need more fuel.
Okay, so we have a couple of fund options. We have one that appears to be problematic by, basically adjusting rates, that motor pool rates. We're kind of down the path a little too far to make that work since we're already past the midpoint of the year. But authorize a transfer from the general fund, which I assume could be surplus or contingency, I imagine. We have, or you could use ARPA funds under the revenue replacement heading. To be consistent, we'd have to rank and score that. What are your thoughts, committee? Sarah?
I guess I'm for the second one, transferring it from the general fund if we have surplus to cover it. Not that I don't think ARPA funds would be appropriate in this case, but I don't know. I think the
I
surplus.
too feel like it's an expendable resource, and it's reflective of a volatile economy, but at least hopefully if the current trend continues, that we'll see some leveling off or some stability in the rates, and hopefully the per gallon price comes down a little bit for all of it. I mean, it was pretty rough for a while there. So, all right, so would that be a motion then to approve the allocation of additional funding from surplus?
Yes.
Okay, that's a motion from Watson. Is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? None are opposed. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Solomon. Item number 8 is discussion and possible action regarding budget modification fencing project. And you'll see that as one of the projects being worked on for 2022. There was some fencing project and some real estate services for Stewart Avenue, 72nd to 28th Avenue for the road project. And so it looks like we need some fund
Yes.
transfers for those two things. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to apologize. When I crafted the agenda, I only referred to the fencing project in the agenda item, so I think you'll just be able to approve the fencing transfer, and then if you would not
If there's no
mind-
harm in waiting, can we do the real estate next time?
Yeah, and then if that can just go right on to council at that same meeting, because you've at least had some
Yeah.
heads up on it.
And that gives us some additional
So I'll
time for public
separate it
notice
into
as well.
two separate resolutions, then one that would meet the 7-day or 10-day requirements.
Right, and then we're not running afoul of our
Right.
agenda. So
Yeah,
if you
that
guys
is
are
on me,
good with that, I
sorry.
think that's fair. Let's talk about the fence project.
Yep.
And so it looks like they are needing a fund transfer of an additional $40,000 to carry that project to completion.
Yes.
Does anybody have questions on that at all? If not, is there a motion to approve that funding, and we'll leave the real estate for next time. Motion by Denny, second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion continues. Let's see here. Item 9 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for legal services. You'll see a request from the city attorney's office. We're only to the midpoint of the year, and litigation activity has been robust. And so she chuckles. We just got a report today as well. The council got from her with just a mid-year update for where they're at with all of the things that they're juggling in their office, and it's many. Obviously, you never know when you'll be in a position where you have to defend yourself, and often that's where municipalities find themselves. So she's requesting additional funding to get through the rest of the year to infuse the legal budget. Does anyone have questions for Ann on that at all? She's here if you do. Go ahead, Doug.
Have we sole sourced this service already, and it's an additional to the same firm?
We don't sole source it. It's determined by whether or not it's covered by insurance, and then the insurer gets to designate defense counsel. So we don't sole source selecting law firms, and that's not required by the procurement policy. Discretion is given to me to hire firms, but technically CIVMIC designates who defense counsel is. Their board has to approve them, so Dan Varlene's office, Davchik and Varlene is the firm in town that's been authorized by CIVMIC to defend us in most actions. Does that answer your question? Okay.
And a number of these other ones are handled by your own staff, right? So they
Correct.
aren't all third-party attorneys?
Correct. And with, obviously, it's been an unprecedented year. We have 10 matters pending now. That's why when I showed what was open and closed, I wanted you to realize what was left. And I don't know if Lisa communicated to you, Mary Ann, I see there wasn't a proposed resolution or budget modification in there. Last time we asked for 100,000, and I think you gave us 70. And now I'm thinking we need about 40 to get through the end of the year, assuming we don't get any other major surprises.
Okay. Sarah?
So I guess that was my question. What is the bottom line? Because it looks like, what, $250,000, 125,000 is the total, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
you
what
only
we've
need-
spent to date is 125.
And you need about 40?
Yep, and that's for services paid through June, so we have half of the year left. And based on the ones that we have pending, we've tried to kind of estimate what we think those will cost us, and we think that without anything further that's really huge, we should be able to get through the year with $40,000.
And then what
And we can
fund?
always do another allocation if she's short after the 40.
And what fund?
Well, as Ann said, a lot of this has to do with, is related to our insurance. We do have an insurance fund. When I looked at the performance of the insurance fund, and this is, covers building, workers' comp, and our liability, we did have a profit of just under $300,000 in 2021. We have strong reserves in that fund, as well as allocations set aside for things like workers' comp claims where, we're dealing with some long-term issues.
Back to the
there.
self-insured days though, right? So,
Well, this isn't health insurance, this is.
no,
we
workers'
had
comp, you were self-insuring that for a time.
We still are.
Okay,
We still
okay.
are self-insured. So anyhow, we generated about a 300,000, it was like 285 profit in 2021 due to lower than expected claims. And so I was going to recommend that we take the funds out of there to fund this shortfall.
Okay. And that still contemplates, the reserves in that fund contemplate that we've adequately funded the deductibles, co-pays, reserves, retentions, any of that stuff that we
Yes,
would be
yes, and that
met
was my
with
point,
also?
yes.
Okay, good. So, and if we're still good and we can afford the 40, that's a sensible spot. I guess, do we have a motion to allocate 40,000 from the insurance fund to the city attorney's budget for this purpose? Motion by Lukens. Is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion or questions?
Mary Ann, when we recover judgments or costs or attorney's fees then for which we take judgments, does that go back into the general fund or into the insurance fund or our legal fee budget? I wasn't sure.
I think it depends.
Okay.
So let's say if it was related to a tax increment district like Stankowski, if we would actually get money out of that, then it would go back to
in
the
there.
tax
Okay.
increment district. If it came out of the general fund, it would go back into the general fund.
Okay.
Good.
So that's good, because then, depending on where it goes, the appropriate funds will get reimbursement if it's available.
And we did get a lot of cases dismissed, I hope you noticed, and we did take judgments where we could, and we've
Yep.
collected all of those.
It's exciting.
So-
That's the best news ever when that happens, so. All right, so with a motion and a second on the floor then to approve, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that item continues and carries as well. Thank you,
Thank you.
Ann. Let's see, item number 10, discussion and possible action regarding the debt issuance schedule. And so you've got some information in your packets there.
And really, I wasn't asking for a decision. It was really just to introduce the fact that we'd like to get debt issuance for 2022 scheduled. Every time we adopt a budget, part of our capital plan expects that we're going to issue a debt. Generally, it's related to street and other infrastructure projects. So in my memo, I show that we had identified $4.8 million as our debt issue in 2022. And it related to things like the DOT projects, street improvements, asphalt overlay, sidewalks, stormwater, street lighting, other capital improvements, which is really concrete, when they go in and replace concrete. The fleet facility of 1.1 million, parking improvements of 280, and then the ERP software of 338,000. So that totals 4.8 million. When we look at the impact, we actually will be, this type of expense is general obligation. Promissory note is typically what the city has done. We retire the debt over a 10-year period of time with a flat repayment, similar to your mortgage where you're paying the same amount.
Yep.
You pay higher interest because your principal is larger when you first take out your mortgage, and then over time, the interest is less and your principal is more. And so we would follow suit this year. We are actually, it would not impact the tax rate at all, and it would actually result in a lower outstanding general obligation debt at the end of the year, because we'll be retiring the 4.6 million of principal this year. I am, or would like the committee to discuss whether we actually want to borrow for the fleet facility, the 1.1 million. My recommendation at this point would be to delay and not issue debt for that, because at this point, we don't have firm plans in place. There are spend down requirements that we have to spend our debt on a timely basis, a 2-year period. This would, perhaps cause us, and you have, in addition to spending it down over 2 years, you have to meet thresholds during that 2-year period. So it could complicate our ability to meet that spend down threshold throughout the life of that 2-year period. And, typically you wouldn't borrow money if you don't really know how you're going to spend it yet.
And we don't know when we're going to owe it. That's the
Right.
kicker there, so.
Because CISM at the last meeting delayed discussion again, and, we're in August. We're
Yeah.
getting close to the end of the year where we'll be looking at 2023. So, it still is in the budget that we would borrow for it, and it's still a placeholder in the budget, so you would be able to carry that over. It's just that it would get added on to the 2024 issues. So, given that, you would be down to about a $3.7 million issue, and I think that put us, as far as, our debt capacity, given our equalized value, we would go down to 37.92% of our allowable versus 46.88 in 2021. So we are seeing a decline in our overall outstanding general obligation debt and more capacity building.
Sure. And so in retiring, now I'm just reading your impact to the general fund, and so obviously we'll borrow less than we pay off. That'll be the second year in a row, I believe, that that's happened, where we borrow, we complete our work, but we borrow less than we pay off, which is good. And that said, then where would that put our total general obligation debt? Do you have a guess?
I didn't put that together.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
so I
I'll have
just-
that. This, like I said, this
I
was
think-
really just to
and-
introduce the
yes.
subject and the
And
calendar.
I think at an upcoming meeting, it would be good for us to reiterate and have a little bit of a readout as to where we sit on total debt, because there seems to be an affinity for some individuals out in the community to combine utility debt with general obligation debt, and then yell out to the public that the city of Wausau owes hundreds of millions of dollars. And so that's not the case, and I think we need some accurate messaging from us as a committee. So if we can get a readout on that at a future meeting, that would be helpful.
Two other points. So the issuance calendar, we would bring it back to the September 13th meeting for you to actually approve going forward. It would go then to the Common Council on September 27th. We would issue the debt because we go through a process where we create documents, borrowing documents, called an official statement, that is basically our marketing to the bond community to increase interest and to have the bondholders understand the risks and our financial condition. And then we would look to close on November 16th. If you recall last year, when we issued debt, it was called parameters debt. And this, our financial advisor is recommending we do that again. And
So
I
that
guess-
allows them to hit the market at the right time, right?
Yes.
So when they see the trend and they're at just the right time.
Yes.
They do it.
Yep.
And bring it back to us and,
And
okay.
you still establish the parameters. So you say we can't accept the debt unless the interest rate is no higher than X, and that it still is a 10-year issue, and then you'll still be provided with all of the documentations from that sale.
Okay.
And it worked out very well last year.
It did, because they were able to really maximize the benefit to us from doing it at the right time, without us having to convene a very rushed meeting to get the schedule. So do you need us to vote on this schedule?
No.
Or can we agree by consensus that this schedule works?
Yep.
Okay, so committee, are you good with this schedule? Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, and I would agree that the fleet facility should not be exercised, that money, if we don't have a commitment on it just yet. But my question is, parking improvements, could you better define that?
Sure. So we are doing some pretty significant improvements to both the Sears and Penny's ramp. It basically is, concrete and structural, I don't know, Eric,
Is it like joint repair?
yeah, IBM type things. I don't know, to extend the longevity of the facilities.
So this is above and beyond routine maintenance? This is not routine maintenance?
Right.
Okay. And then if I remember, I thought last finance or the one before, didn't we move that 280 to a TID
Yes.
12?
Yes, you did, but it still is general obligation debt. So it will be retired, that portion of the issue will be retired with tax increment, but it's still part of the general obligation issue. It still requires your approval. It still falls within our calculations for allowable debt issuance.
So we borrow it, we assign the debt to the TID, and the TID pays it back?
Yes.
But we still control the yes and the no on that?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess my main point is to minimize or to eliminate general obligation funds borrowing
Oh, yeah.
for routine maintenance. And that's not what this is?
No.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So with that, I agree also on the fleet facility. I think once we can settle on a location, we have at least a conceptual plan. I think that we'll be able to revisit that borrowing, and we're so close to the end of the year that by the time anything gets rolling in earnest, we may be into 2023 anyway. So especially with winter coming on. So, okay, so then do we agree by consensus that this schedule works? And direct Mary Ann to continue with our financial planners to move that date order forward? Okay, agreed. Okay, and then, so now we have the presentation on the 2021 financial results. Now, we are butted up against the start of
Yeah.
the economic development meeting, so we have the ability to hold these two reports, 11 and 12, until next time, if you guys are good with that. And so we'll have those reports then September 13th. So with that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, our audit is done. The auditors will be coming for a presentation on the September 27th meeting.
Okay.
They weren't able to make the 13th, but they'll be coming on the 27th.
Okay, that sounds good. And we usually have a lighter agenda in the second one anyway, so it's easier to get a little longer presentation from them. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn, and we'll,
So moved.
motion by Watson, second by Lukens. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. So we'll stand adjourned. We'll take like 5 minutes for public access and all of us to reset for economic development, and then they'll start in here right after that.